Nobody suspected the quiet man on the 19th floor. Not the investors who trusted him with their life savings, not the banks that treated him like royalty, not even the regulators whose job it was to catch people like him. Bernie Madoff didn't just blend into Wall Street, he became its most polished illusion. The kind of illusion so perfect, so consistent, that even the victims applauded it while it was happening. Yet behind the charm, behind the reputation, behind the billions, there was nothing. Nothing but a stack of forged statements, imaginary profits, and an empty office where the biggest Ponzi scheme in history was engineered with a cheap computer, a dot matrix printer, and the boldness of a man who believed he was untouchable. The story of Bernie Madoff begins with a man who mastered the art of looking legitimate. He started in the 1960s with a small investment firm operating out of a shabby office. No fancy equipment, no elite pedigree, just determination and the uncanny ability to convince people he was smarter than everyone else. Bernie realized early that success on Wall Street wasn't just about skill, it was about perception. And perception was something he controlled expertly. He built that perception brick by brick. He became one of the founders of NASDAQ. He was photographed beside billionaires and senators. His name carried the weight of credibility, power, and stability. By the early 2000s, people whispered that Bernie Madoff had the magic touch. A man whose investment returns never seemed to fail. Markets crashed, bubbles burst, fortunes evaporated. But Bernie's numbers stayed the same. Calm, consistent, unshaken. That consistency was precisely the problem. Real investments rise and fall. They breathe. They react. But Madoff's returns looked like they came from a fantasy world. Smooth, steady, profitable every single month. He rarely posted losses. It was too perfect, mathematically impossible. Yet instead of questioning it, investors lined up. The wealthy begged to join. Banks fought for a chance to send him clients. Even celebrities became evangelists for the Madoff miracle. Steven Spielberg trusted him. Kevin Bacon lost a fortune to him. Nobel Prize-winning scientists fell for him. And some of the most respected Jewish charities in the world saw him as a financial savior. People weren't just investing in a fund. They were investing in Bernie himself, a man who was always calm, always confident, always reassuring. A man whose charm disarmed even the most skeptical minds. A man who wore the mask of trust better than anyone. But behind the locked door of a small office on the 19th floor, an office employees jokingly called the fraud room, the truth was unraveling. There were no trades, no real investments, no brilliant strategies. Only piles of fake account statements created to make it look like billions were growing safely. Madoff's operation was a simple Ponzi scheme. Old investors were paid using the money of new investors, but the scale was monstrous. At its peak, his clients believed they were collectively worth more than $65 billion. Yet only a tiny fraction of that money actually existed. The rest was numbers typed on paper, backed by nothing but trust. For decades, suspicious analysts raised alarms. One man, Harry Markopoulos, even submitted detailed evidence to regulators proving Madoff's returns were mathematically impossible. His reports were ignored repeatedly. Regulators dismissed him, claiming no one with Madoff's reputation could be a fraud. Reputation. That was Bernie's real currency. But every lie has an expiration date. In 2008, the global financial crisis hit, and investors panicked. They rushed to withdraw billions from Madoff's fund. For the first time, Bernie couldn't find enough new money to plug the holes. The machine stopped. The illusion shattered. On a cold December day, Bernie Madoff sat his two sons down in his apartment and confessed, "It's all one big lie. His empire, his legacy, his fortune, everything was fiction." The next morning, they turned him in. When FBI agents arrived at his penthouse, Madoff didn't protest. He simply said, "I knew this day would come." After decades of deception, he seemed almost relieved. as if the weight of the lie had finally become heavier than the consequences of the truth. Courtrooms filled with devastated victims. Lifelong savings vanished. Charities collapsed. Families were ruined. Some investors took their own lives. One of Madoff's own sons died by suicide, unable to escape the shadow of his father's crimes. The emotional wreckage stretched far beyond the financial damage. Bernie Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison, a symbolic number meant to communicate the magnitude of the betrayal. He spent the final years of his life behind bars, far from the luxury and influence that once defined him. He died in 2021, still insisting he didn't act alone, still shifting blame, still wrestling with the legacy of destruction he created. To this day, the Madoff scandal remains the largest Ponzi scheme ever uncovered. Not because it was clever, not because it was sophisticated, but because it exploited the most powerful force in finance: trust. People trusted the image of Bernie Madoff more than they trusted logic, mathematics, or even their own doubts. It was the perfect crime, until the moment it wasn't. A reminder that the greatest frauds in history aren't built on complex algorithms or exotic financial instruments. They're built on belief. And as long as people are willing to believe in a man who promises the impossible, the spirit of Bernie Madoff will always find a place to rise again.